Let's start by just making one thing completely clear. There is no such thing as a bad generation of the BMW M3. Not one. No matter what they might do to the front end styling wise, they are all good. You could find an argument for every single generation to have been the best. They've all got their own fan groups, willing to defend their preferred M3 to the death. We like them all, but we definitely think there's a few that get closer to what an M3 should be than the others. So let's kick off at the bottom. We'll start with 1992's E36, the second generation of BMW's best-selling mid-market exec to wear an M badge. It had a pretty hard task when it arrived, following on from the E30, a car that had not only gone down in legend as one of the greatest performance machines in history, but set the standard to explain exactly what an M3 is. First off, it looked quite different. Gone were the round headlights, in came rectangular units, as that became BMW's design style at the time. Perhaps more importantly, it changed two things about M3s. It ditched the barking inline-4 engine for a slightly more sonorous straight-6, and it expanded the range to include an M3 with 4 doors for the first time. Power now stood at 290 horsepower. The E36 3 Series chassis was lowered by 3 centimeters, and the E36 sprouted 17-inch alloys. In 1995, BMW retooled the E36 M3 even more, giving it a little facelift that included a rear spoiler, and boring out that straight-6 to 3.2 litres for 321 horsepower. It could now hit 62 miles an hour in 5.5 seconds. As a car, if you take away the M badge, it's a cracker. Sharp handling from a good chassis, a compelling engine. You could even, if you were a bit mental, opt for a sequential gearbox, which was pretty much just a standard manual that shifted itself. But in the grand scheme of M3s, the E36 feels like a starting point for what was to follow. The template that would allow the E46 that followed to be exceptional. For us, it's the starting point in our M3 journey. In 2014, BMW committed a serious automotive faux pas. It ditched a screaming, naturally aspirated V8 in favour of a straight-6 that was, horror of all horrors, turbocharged. It would be a lie to say that the 3-litre straight-6 wasn't a good engine, but it just did turn down a little something that the M3 had always had to that point. The turbo model wasn't quite as delicate to drive. It didn't feel quite as much of a precision machine. Instead, it suddenly felt a whole lot more brutal. A Bavarian muscle car, some said. And since it had 430 horsepower now, which would later swell to 500, you could see why. The M3 now hit 62 miles an hour in 4.1 seconds and came with a 7-speed double-clutch gearbox to rifle through the changes. Of course, it was fun, with all that power through the rear wheels and a chassis that absolutely allowed for a little bit more, how shall we put it, play. The M3 was still one of the best machines around, but the original M3 essence had just sort of seeped away a little bit. Bigger and heavier than the cars that preceded it, slower and less efficient than the cars that followed it. So surely the E92 is actually the worst M3? No, of course not. Its 4-litre V8 would scream around to 8,000 RPM and was bespoke to the M3. And it wasn't just a big old lump. Double Vanos, individual throttle bodies and more meant this V8 was sophisticated. It had 420 horsepower and, perhaps more importantly, its sheer size meant the E92 had to have a power dome in the bonnet to accommodate it, which was just plain cool. This was an era where, for possibly the first time, it had real competition too. The RS4 was now great, and the C63 hoved into view to become a big booming drift machine. But neither of those could quite match the soul that the catchily named S65 E40 engine brought to the party. The scream that it made as it pounded towards the limiter at 8,300 RPM was something that you would never forget. But why is it only at number 4 on our list? Well, that extra weight over its predecessors meant that it didn't quite match the lightweight formula of old. Drivers in the day complained of numb steering and difficult to read braking performance. Much like the consternations that accompany the news of the new, heavier M5 today, the E92 faced accusations of being just, well, a little bit too lardy for an M3. Times had changed. Cars were getting bigger, and that engine was an all-time great, but it wasn't quite the original, the alpha, the OG, the founding father, the first real M car, the E30 M3. Every other M3 has been just another performance car. The original was a racing car for the road, a car that was totally designed with one purpose in mind: to beat Mercedes in the DTM. It couldn't really be more different to the E92 if it tried. Half the cylinders with its barky little inline-4 2-litre engine, lighter in weight, available only as a coupe and with boxy add-ons everywhere. It was sort of the Lotus Cortina for the 1980s. If you've driven an E30, you know why it's so beloved. The engine sounds great when you're revving it to the limit, and the handling feels sharp and intuitive. The gearbox is enjoyable to use, and playing with the traction is very, very fun. If we were to look for a fault that drops it down the list, it's perhaps that engine. Sonorous, in the right conditions it might be, but it is still an inline-4, a casualty of the rules of the Deutsche Tourenwagen Meisterschaft of the day. So it does just sound like an inline-4, and it's not a monster, giving 200 horsepower on a good day. But if you buy one, you're basically buying the most successful touring car in history, and it looks fantastic. Nothing in BMW's arsenal has ever been as stunningly arched. Ooh, controversial. Those of you still here might be around because you've driven the G80, and perhaps more likely because you've driven the first M3 Touring. Quite possibly the best car to have been released this decade? Honestly, the four-wheel drive version is better, and you can stick it into permanent rear-wheel drive if you really want. And something about the transformation from coupe or saloon into estate has made the M3 Touring an absolutely magnificent machine. Also, we're biased because, well, we love estates. 500 horsepower comes from an inline-6, a twin turbocharged 3-litre, given another catchy name, the S58B30T0, that goes through either an 8-speed ZF automatic gearbox or, in very rare cases, a 6-speed manual. And together, it is an excellent mixture, especially when you add in the magnificent tunable traction control system. It could never have top spot because, well, we all know it's not a looker, and many take issue with it being fitted with a slushy torque converter gearbox rather than dual clutch. I don't mind it, but some really do. But the G80 and 81 absolutely deserve a place right in the pantheon of great M cars. Did 3 Series peak with the E46? In fact, did BMW design as a whole peak with the E46? Hyperbole? Maybe. Quite reasonable as a question. We think so. The E46 M3 is the king of the M3s. It looks great. It feels like it's the right size. The engine has a lovely sound and power delivery, and it's just a showstopper. We are back in straight 6 territory here, but that S54 3.2 litre unit revs all the way to 8,000 RPM, and with no turbocharger in sight, it really does sing right through the range. It also responds to your right foot with an absolute snap, alive to every request you might have, and ready to respond without any delay. The 6-speed manual gearbox and a first outing for BMW's variable M differential helped to package this into the realms of all-time great cars, never mind just M cars. Then there's the subtlety to the looks. Yes, it's got a bigger bumper than the standard 3. Yes, it has bigger arches. Yes, the rear is a bit more meaty, but it's all only a bit. The significant changes to see are the side strakes behind the front arches and its lovely quad exhausts. It's the perfect mix of subtlety and muscle. There you are. Those are our favourite BMW M3s of all time, but you undoubtedly disagree. I mean, we've put the G80 in, so plenty of you stopped watching ages ago. If you do, let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to see more that we do here at Goodwood Road and Racing.